for what it's worth, I've gone on for years about the importance of thinking about the long term in relation to...
King Charles finally broke his silence after a heartbreaking update that shocked everyone. His calm expression carried a mix of pain, strength, and truth as he admitted, "Sometimes life changes in ways we never dream of, but we must face it." Those words were heavy, real, and deeply resonant, touching millions. The royal family was shaken, supporters were anxious, and this moment was far more than a routine royal statement. It was emotional, serious, and profoundly heartbreaking. The world watched closely, gripped by the same questions. What happened to King Charles, and why is this update so devastating? For 43 days, the king said nothing, leaving the public to endure agonizing speculation, wild theories, and headlines that screamed for answers that never came. The silence from Buckingham Palace was unusual and deafening, and in that void, something was clearly amiss. Rumors began circulating in late November 2024, suggesting trouble within the royal inner circle. Palace staff were the first to notice unusual signs. Cancelled meetings, a sudden influx of private doctors at odd hours, and the tense, hurried expressions of senior advisors who normally moved with measured calm. By early December, the British press had caught on, with veteran royal correspondents piecing together clues from the subtle shifts in palace life, all pointing to something significant being quietly concealed behind those historic walls. Statements began piecing together a puzzle from fragments of information, a cancelled engagement here, a cryptic health update there. On December 8th, the king appeared briefly in public looking unusually strained. His smile didn't quite reach his eyes, and his handshake with a visiting dignitary lingered a fraction too long, as if he were steadying himself. Yet Charles said nothing, and the palace said nothing. In that vacuum, speculation grew monstrous. Social media erupted with theories, from the plausible to the absurd. Was it his health? Prince William? Something involving Princess Catherine after her difficult year? The public could not understand that Charles's silence was not by choice but out of love, a desperate effort to protect those he cared about from a truth too painful even for him to face. For a man who had spent his entire life in the public eye, some truths were too raw, too devastating to share without first processing them himself. Pressure mounted from all sides. Members of Parliament asked questions. The Archbishop of Canterbury requested a private audience, and even former palace officials publicly expressed concern over the unprecedented silence. The machinery of the monarchy, a system that had endured over 1,000 years, seemed to stall because its center could not find the words. Charles, known for his kindness, empathy, and lifelong advocacy for causes others ignored, environmental protection, architectural heritage, and disadvantaged youth, was breaking under the weight of it all. Photographs from those 43 days revealed a man slightly hunched, hollow-eyed, and aged beyond his years, his pain unmistakable to those who looked closely. The silence finally ended not with a planned announcement but through a profoundly human moment. On January 15, 2025, during what was meant to be a routine meeting with the Prime Minister, Charles could no longer contain his emotions. The control he had maintained for 43 days shattered, and in his raw vulnerability, the truth began to spill out. The Prime Minister, known for her own steely composure, was reportedly moved to tears, immediately clearing her schedule, making calls, and setting in motion the steps that allowed Charles to speak publicly about what had tormented him in private. The hidden truth, which Charles had sought to protect, began months earlier with something seemingly minor. Queen Camilla, always robust and energetic despite being 77, started feeling unusually tired. She had been the king's steadfast support during his own health challenges earlier in the year, standing beside him with unwavering strength when, having faced his own cancer diagnosis, Charles now watched as Queen Camilla confronted her own health struggles with characteristic stoicism. At first, she brushed it off, joking with staff about aging and needing more sleep. But Charles, a husband of nearly 20 years, noticed the subtle changes in her demeanor. Camilla insisted she was fine, prioritizing her duties and engagements, refusing to show weakness, especially while her husband battled his own illness. By September 2024, her exhaustion became impossible to ignore. She began scaling back public appearances and canceling long-planned engagements, citing vague reasons such as seasonal illness or the need for rest. Behind those statements, however, lay growing dread. Tests began in October, blood work, scans, and consultations with specialists arriving discreetly and leaving through back passages. Charles accompanied her to every appointment, his face a mask of controlled fear, confronting his greatest nightmare, losing another loved one. On November 3, 2024, the diagnosis came. A kind-faced specialist, who had treated the royal family for decades, delivered the news with compassion but no sugarcoating. Camilla had a rare autoimmune condition that had silently attacked her system for months. The disease was treatable, but the treatment would be aggressive, lengthy, and would require her full withdrawal from public life. The revelation devastated Charles. After decades of waiting, preparing, and planning, just 18 months into his reign, everything seemed to be unraveling. Yet Camilla's illness was only part of the hidden truth. As she began treatment, another crisis emerged within the family. Prince William, the heir apparent, was struggling. The earlier health crisis of his wife, Catherine, had shaken him deeply, and supporting her through treatment while maintaining composure for their 3 children had pushed him to his limits. Now, with his stepmother facing serious health issues and his father also undergoing treatment, the weight of the monarchy and the immediacy of his future responsibilities overwhelmed him. The cracks in William's composure appeared in ways that alarmed all who witnessed them, revealing a confidence and capability that had once seemed unshakable to be far more fragile and human than anyone had expected. Prince William's vulnerability became increasingly apparent, revealing just how unprepared he felt for the burdens of his role. Behind palace walls, arguments grew heated. William, in his fear and frustration, lashed out in ways he never had before, questioning decisions, challenging his father, and even expressing doubts about whether he wanted the destiny that had been his since birth. Charles, meanwhile, struggled to reach his son, caught between his wife's need for support, his daughter-in-law's efforts to mediate, and the grandchildren's desire for stability. Catherine, still recovering from her own health crisis, tried to steady the family but was too fragile herself to carry the full weight. Charles found himself in an impossible position. The country expected a functioning monarch, yet he was only one man, battling cancer, carrying grief in his heart, and bearing the weight of 1,000 years of history. Palace staff watched helplessly as the family they served faltered, observing the king emerge from meetings with his son looking devastated, hearing raised voices behind closed doors, and witnessing hastily wiped away tears before public appearances. Loyalty kept them silent, but whispers began circulating by December, signaling that something was very wrong in the House of Windsor. Charles's dilemma as a father compounded the crisis. From the moment William was born on June 21, 1982, Charles's priorities had shifted. He vowed to be present for his sons in ways his own parents had not been. He changed nappies, played on the floor, and defied protocol to show public affection, trying to shield them from pain even as his marriage to Diana fell apart, a failure that haunted him. Through all the challenges, he prioritized being a father above all else, placing his sons' needs before his own and striving to protect them from the harshest realities of their world, even when it cost him personally. Decades after raising his own sons, Charles realized that a father's protective instincts only intensify with time. Watching William, now 42 and a father himself, struggle under the crushing weight of future kingship was more painful than anything Charles had endured. He would have taken on his son's burdens if he could, carrying it all himself to spare William even a moment of suffering, but monarchy doesn't work that way. The crown passes from parent to child whether anyone wants it or not. It is an unalterable destiny. Charles, who had spent 73 years preparing for a role he never asked for, now watched his son face the same inescapable reality, and it was destroying them both. As a father, he longed to tell William that he didn't have to do it, that he could be human and vulnerable, that stepping back was allowed, but as king, Charles could not. The monarchy cannot function if the heir can simply walk away. William's destiny was sealed the moment Charles ascended the throne. The weight of history pressed on him until it felt unbearable. In early January, his private secretary found him sitting in the dark, tears streaming down his face, the King of England overwhelmed by responsibilities he could not meet and problems he could not solve. Through his tears, Charles admitted he was failing everyone. Camilla, by not being strong enough to support her through illness. William, by not knowing how to help him. Catherine, by not shielding her from family stress during her recovery. His grandchildren, by allowing instability into their lives. And the nation, by not being the steady monarch they deserved. Thoughts of his own mother, Queen Elizabeth II, surfaced constantly. Had she truly balanced her children with her duty, or had she simply chosen the crown repeatedly at their expense? Charles remembered the loneliness of his childhood and the formal distance he had endured, realizing perhaps that the crown demands everything and leaves nothing for the people you love. Meetings with William grew increasingly painful. Charles saw in his son the same trapped feeling, the same resentment, the same desperate desire to be something other than what destiny had imposed, and he had no comfort to offer. It does not get easier. He knew you simply learn to carry it, day after day, year after year. By mid-January, Charles understood that the silence could no longer continue. The pretense could not hold. Something had to give, and it would have to be him. On the morning of January 15th, 2025, cold and grey over London, Charles woke at 5:30 as always but could not bring himself out of bed. Camilla slept beside him, her breathing steady but shallow, and the weight of all that he had been holding in private pressed down like never before. By early morning, Charles watched Camilla sleep, the medication making her drowsy and robbing her of the vibrant energy that had always defined her, and felt his heart break all over again. By 7 o'clock, he was dressed and sitting in his study, staring at a blank piece of paper. For a week, he had tried to draft a statement, but the words wouldn't come. How could one summarize a family's pain in a press release? Reduce complex human suffering to bullet points in official palace language? It felt impossible, and maybe it was. The meeting with the Prime Minister, scheduled for 10 o'clock, was meant to be routine, a discussion about upcoming legislation, yet the moment she arrived and saw his face, she knew something was catastrophically wrong. The king appeared hollowed out, a shell of the man she had met countless times before. In the formal receiving room, with portraits of Queen Victoria watching sternly from the walls, she asked a polite question about a state visit, and Charles could only shake his head. He could no longer pretend that everything was fine. Slowly at first, then with increasing urgency, he poured out the truth. Camilla's diagnosis and the severity of her condition, the aggressive treatment she had begun, William's crisis of faith in his own destiny, the arguments behind palace walls, Catherine's ongoing fragility, his own cancer treatments, and the exhaustion that never left him. And then, the part he had barely admitted to himself. He didn't know if he could continue. The King of England sat before the Prime Minister, tears streaming down his face, confessing that he was breaking under the weight of the crown. Despite a lifetime of preparation, nothing had readied him for the reality of being monarch while watching everyone he loved suffer. Yet the Prime Minister, to her credit, did not flinch, did not minimize his pain, and simply listened as the full weight of the truth unfolded. The Prime Minister didn't offer platitudes or attempt to soothe his pain, she simply listened. And when Charles finally fell silent, exhausted by the confession, she asked a simple yet profound question. What did he need? Not what the crown needed, not what the nation needed, but what Charles the man, the father, the husband needed. The question broke something open in him. Months, perhaps years, had passed since anyone asked. Everyone always asked what the king wanted, what duty demanded, what the monarchy required, but no one had asked what he needed. He wanted to stop pretending, to tell the truth, to ask for help, and to make the world understand that he and his family were human, struggling, and could not carry it alone any longer. The Prime Minister acted immediately, and within 2 hours, a plan was in motion. A televised address, not a formal speech from the throne room, but something intimate and honest. Charles would speak directly to the nation from his study at Clarence House, the place where he had spent countless sleepless nights wrestling with these truths. There would be no advisor-written scripts, no carefully vetted talking points, just a father and a king telling the public what was really happening behind the palace walls. The broadcast was scheduled for 7 p.m., and news of it spread like wildfire, fueling speculation. Was he abdicating? Was there a constitutional crisis? Had something happened to William? The palace remained silent, intensifying the frenzy. By 6 p.m., the nation was glued to their screens. At 6:45, Charles entered his study alone. Cameras and lights were set up, a single chair positioned directly facing the lens, no desk, no barrier, nothing between him and the millions who would watch. He sat, took a deep breath, and waited for the live signal. When the red light came on, he began to speak, his voice steady yet thick with emotion. He thanked the public for their patience during his long silence, acknowledged the worry and speculation it had caused, and apologized. Then he did something no British monarch had ever done before. He admitted that he had been silent because he did not know how to speak about pain this deep while upholding the dignity demanded by the crown. He began to tell them about Camilla. Charles spoke about Camilla with profound tenderness and obvious love, describing her illness, her treatment, and the way she had silently suffered while trying to support him through his own health challenges. Even the most cynical viewers were moved. This was not a king speaking of a consort, but a husband speaking of his wife, terrified of losing her. He then turned to William, speaking honestly about the pressures facing the next generation of royals without betraying his son's confidence, describing how William and Catherine had endured enormous health challenges in 2024 and how the weight of future responsibility bore down on a young family trying to heal. Charles's voice cracked as he spoke about his grandchildren Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis, who deserved a childhood free from the burden of duty, illness, and fear, and a grandfather able to be present rather than consumed by the crown. Then came the unprecedented moment. He asked the British people for something monarchs are never supposed to ask for: grace, patience, and understanding that, despite the crowns, palaces, and centuries of tradition, the royal family were just people. Flawed, struggling, sometimes breaking, and doing their best under impossible circumstances. He admitted he did not have all the answers, that he was scared, and that some days he didn't know how he would get through them. He asked for support for his family in the same spirit British families support one another in times of crisis, with compassion, space to heal, and faith that they would emerge stronger. The address lasted 17 minutes. When it ended, Charles sat in silence for a long moment before the cameras were turned off, then stood, walked from his study, and went to find Camilla. He had told the truth, and now they would all have to live with the consequences. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Within minutes, social media erupted, and news channels scrambled to analyze every word, pause, and emotion on the king's face. The world had witnessed something unprecedented. A reigning British monarch admitting vulnerability, asking for help, and revealing the depths of private family struggles. It was historic, shocking, and it exposed simmering divisions within the royal family. Prince William watched the broadcast from Adelaide Cottage, Catherine beside him, as their father's words filled the room and their living room. William's face passed through a storm of emotions. Shock, anger, betrayal. His hands gripped the arms of his chair until his knuckles turned white. When the broadcast ended, he sat in stunned silence for a full minute before standing abruptly and leaving the room. Catherine found him outside, pacing in the cold January air, his breath forming clouds in the night. William felt exposed. While his father hadn't revealed the specifics of their arguments, the implications were clear. The heir to the throne was struggling, buckling under pressure. He had spent his adult life carefully cultivating an image of readiness and capability, and in 17 minutes, Charles had undermined it all. Headlines were already forming, questioning William's fitness for kingship, speculating about abdication, and raising doubts about the stability of the succession. Catherine tried to calm him, but she wrestled with her own conflicted feelings. Part of her understood Charles's desperation, his need for honesty after months of suffocating silence, but another part resented being drawn into the public narrative while still recovering from her cancer battle, which had been the most difficult experience of her life. At Clarence House, Charles waited for William's call, knowing his son would be furious. Their brief conversation earlier had been tense. Charles had tried to explain his reasoning, while William, in the middle of a school pickup, fired back questions he couldn't properly answer. Now, as minutes ticked by, the distance between them widened. When William finally called at 8:47, his voice was tight with controlled rage. He demanded to know how his father could expose the family's struggles publicly without consulting him, without giving him a chance to shield his own children from the inevitable media frenzy. Charles attempted to explain that the silence had become unsustainable and that controlling the narrative was better than letting speculation run rampant, but William wasn't listening. He ended the call after less than 3 minutes, leaving Charles alone with a dead phone and a crushing sense of isolation. Princess Anne reacted with her usual bluntness, calling her brother within an hour to declare that he had made a catastrophic mistake. The monarchy, she reminded him, had survived for over 1,000 years by maintaining mystique, by shielding the public from the messy humanity behind the crown. Their mother had mastered this art, enduring personal tragedies, family scandals, and political crises without ever breaking the fourth wall or asking for sympathy, and believed Charles had just set a dangerous precedent that could irreparably weaken the institution. The criticism, harsh as it was, came from a place of concern for the monarchy itself, but reactions from other parts of the family were more personal and bitter. Extended relatives who had spent years cultivating carefully managed public images felt betrayed. Charles had made vulnerability acceptable, allowing struggle to be acknowledged, but in doing so, he had made everyone else's stoic silence appear cold by comparison. Why hadn't they spoken about their own difficulties? Why maintain the stiff upper lip while the king was permitted to break down? Weak from treatment but unwavering in loyalty, Queen Camilla became Charles's staunchest defender, making calls from her bed with a determined voice, reminding everyone that her husband was fighting cancer while simultaneously serving as king, father, and husband, and asking them to show the compassion they would demand for anyone else in similar circumstances. Yet even Camilla's advocacy fueled tension. Some considered her support appropriate, while others whispered that her emotional investment blinded her judgment. Public reaction was equally divided. Millions expressed sympathy and support, admiring Charles's courage in speaking openly about mental health, family pressure, and the impossible standards placed on public figures, sharing personal struggles and thanking him for normalizing imperfection. But backlash was fierce too. Critics accused Charles of self-indulgence, of exploiting his platform for sympathy, and questioned whether someone unable to bear such pressure deserved the crown. Calls for abdication remained fringe but louder than they had been in decades, while tabloids, sensing controversy, ran stories questioning Charles's judgment and fitness to reign. Most painful of all was the division at home. By January 18th, 3 days after the broadcast, William and Charles had not spoken beyond their brief, angry phone call. Catherine reached out to Camilla with supportive messages, but the conversation was strained. Both women were attempting to bridge a gap that felt wider than words could span. The children, sensing the tension even without understanding it fully, grew confused. Prince George, at 11, increasingly aware of his future, asked questions William could not answer. The carefully maintained image of a united royal family had shattered, and everyone knew that restoring it, if possible, would require far more than apologies and carefully crafted statements. It would demand fundamental changes in how the family functioned and faced its challenges together. The family's future, and the monarchy's future, now hang in delicate balance, as Charles, Camilla, William, Catherine, and the younger generation navigate the impossible space between public duty and private humanity. How they relate to each other, how they balance responsibility with love, how they reconcile their roles as symbols of continuity with their needs as human beings, these are the questions that no one, not even Charles, has definitive answers to. The monarchy itself faces an unprecedented moment of introspection. This is not about scandal or external pressure, but about the very people who embody the institution questioning whether they can continue carrying such a weight. Charles knows that his decision to speak openly has set something in motion that cannot be undone, and the crown will never be the same again. His honesty may have forged a new connection with the British public, particularly younger generations who value authenticity and see his vulnerability as courageous, necessary, and a sign that tradition can evolve. Yet the risks are enormous, for the monarchy's authority has always relied partly on distance, mystique, and the perception of otherness. If kings and queens appear too human, too fallible, their justification for existing atop British society is questioned. Meanwhile, immediate practical concerns weigh heavily. Camilla's treatment will continue for months, leaving Charles to shoulder ceremonial and constitutional duties while managing his own ongoing health challenges. William's crisis of purpose leaves the succession fragile, with every public appearance risking exposure of his internal conflict, while Catherine must continue her recovery under renewed stress and scrutiny. Westminster and government circles quietly discuss contingency plans in case of further illness or abdication, even whispering about a regency for Princess and until George comes of age. Commonwealth leaders are watching closely, some reconsidering the monarchy's role within their nations. In this context, Charles has called a family meeting for February 1, 2025, at Windsor Castle, summoning every senior royal to confront public perception, family dynamics, health realities, and constitutional duties, all while attempting to maintain unity without suppressing differences. He prepares for this gathering with both hope and dread. Hope that bringing problems into the light will allow resolution, and dread at the inevitable pain and resistance to change. Beneath it all, though, there is relief. The truth is out, pretense stripped away, revealing the family as human, flawed, and uncertain. In the coming months, the monarchy will either emerge renewed and more connected to the people it serves, or begin a slow decline into irrelevance. The outcome depends on William reclaiming his strength, public opinion, and unpredictable events. But Charles has made his choice: honesty over pretense, humanity over mystique, love over duty when the two conflict. Whether that choice preserves the institution or accelerates its decline, he believes it was the right decision, because at the end of his life, he wants to remember himself not merely as a king but as a father who fought for his children, a husband who supported his wife, and a man who did right by those he loved, even when the cost was everything he had worked for.